if you want, I think you can count on it that the Flannery O'Connor Institute for the Humanities will try to keep track all of this stuff, and advertise it as much as possible all over the place. So when in doubt, hope that you can come to our websites and find out what's going on. Okay, I think that's all of my stuff. Well, I should probably say the next things that are coming up for me, I mean, we've got a trio of NEH veterans talking on April the 18th about the hot topic of Flannery O'Connor and race. That's the thing you can sign up for and join us. And then our next meeting like this one, where we're going to finish The Habit of Being, the last letters that Flannery O'Connor wrote on April 25th. And because it's, the birthday year and the celebrations are going on all over the place, I'm not quite sure how many additional Zooms are about to be set up or are already set up. I know on April 2nd that the plan is that some of the people who are involved in putting together the big exhibit at the library at Emory in Atlanta, this is an exhibit about Flannery O'Connor, Alice Walker, and Benny Andrews. Some of the people who put it together are going to do a Zoom with help from the Flannery O'Connor Institute for the Humanities, talking about how they did it and what they did and why they did it the way they did it, and so on and so on and so on. That show is still up. It might be the sort of thing that makes you want to come to Atlanta to take a look at it. Everybody I have talked to about that exhibit says there's too much to see in one day, that you go see it and you say, oh, I've just scratched the surface. I've got to go back. Well, I haven't seen it the first time. I'm going to have to play catch up on this one, but everybody's giving it very good reviews. Okay. All right, moving right along. Let's talk about these letters. And let me remind you that before we get going, that I have my little list of things to say, but there's no particular structure to this. So anytime you feel like making a comment, inserting something, changing the subject, feel free. Say something in the chat or raise your hand, and I will try to notice. Okay. When I finish these letters for these 2 years, and I ask myself, what's significant? I guess I have two main things. One is that this is an era when Flannery's having a little bit of trouble writing. If you go to that book about O'Connor's career and her manuscripts, the manuscripts of Flannery O'Connor at Georgia College, there's a chart at the front of the book, The Development of O'Connor's Fiction, where they try to say what Flannery was doing all the time, what was she working on, how long did it take her to write each story. In 1961 and 1962, the 2 years we're talking about tonight, she wrote 2 stories. Everything That Rises Must Converge, which she was very pleased with. She was proud of it. She said, this is a new thing for me. But then she also said, I wish I could do more that's a departure. I wish I could do something that's different from what I've done in the past. I kind of feel like I'm in a rut. And then the other story that she published was The Lamb Shall Enter First, which might be an example of being in a rut, since it's kind of a rewrite of her second novel that she had published in 1960, The Violent Bear It Away. What else was she doing? She was doing a lot of lecturing. She was traveling around the country. She's not stuck at home. She's traveling around the country and giving talks and making some money to impress mama. And she's struggling along with Why Do the Heathen Rage, her attempted third novel. And you're going to be hearing more about that. You know, Jessica Hooten Wilson's just published her book that reports on a lot of the manuscripts and you know, presents Jessica's opinion about this and that and the other, and she even has an ending to the plot that she thinks is justified by what she can put together of the manuscripts. But this is also an era when, you know, Flannery is about to have writer's block, which is only going to get worse in 1963. Okay, so as much as I praise O'Connor for being determined and working hard and getting a lot done in spite of her physical problems, this is an era when the physical problems and the writer's block were about as serious as they got. Okay, now that's one comment. The other comment about, you know, big important things I want to say tonight, that would be, I want to make a comment about Flannery O'Connor on the topic of conversion. Why? Because it seems to me, now, you know, other people who have different opinions about this, seems to me Flannery is not exactly consistent about this. It's always interesting to me when Flannery O'Connor always seems to know what she thinks about everything, when she appears to change her mind or be at odds with herself or inconsistent somehow. So I want to direct your attention under that heading to page 427 and page 430 in the Habit of Being. Okay, now get there quickly. And I'm going to point out to you two passages from two letters, both written to Betty Hester, who's called A in the Habit of Being. It's the same person, two letters to the same person. And look what she says to Betty Hester about conversion. January 21st of 1961. I don't know if anybody can be converted without seeing themselves in a kind of blasting, annihilating light, a blast that will last a lifetime. Okay. I can think of Flannery O'Connor stories where the climax of the story does kind of seem like a blasting, annihilating light, a blast that will last a lifetime. And partly that's because sometimes characters get killed at the end of a Flannery O'Connor story. And so whatever happens to them on the last page looks like it's going to last the rest of their life because there's not much of the rest of their life for them to deal with. Okay, she's explaining this to Betty Hester because why? Because Betty Hester is talking to Flannery about Betty Hester's views on Catholicism. And it would be really nice here to have Betty Hester's letters to Flannery. What were they saying to each other so that Flannery is trying to explain conversion to somebody who just converted? Okay, now, okay, maybe it's a blasting, annihilating light. 3 pages later, February 6th, you know, what's that? Less than 2 weeks later, she writes another letter to Betty Hester and says the following. Second paragraph of that letter. In the matter of conversion, I guess they're talking about conversion. I think Flannery says to Betty, I think you are thinking about the initial conversion. I am thinking possibly about the deepening of conversion. I don't think of conversion as being once and for all, and that's that. I would say on page 427, she's saying conversion is once and for all, and that's that. I think once the process has begun and continues, that you are continually turning inward toward God and away from your own egocentricity, and that you have to see the selfish side of yourself in order to turn away from it. I measure God by everything that I am not. Well, that's a really interesting passage just on its own, consistent or inconsistent. It reminds me of some stuff that Flannery said in the prayer journal. But it's a different view of conversion. And I can think of stories in which conversion takes time and it's not once and done forever. It's a different view of conversion, and maybe it's just as valid as the once and done view of conversion. I think that Flannery is talking about theology, and it relates to how she's feeling about her writing, that she is kind of transitioning as her career goes on towards the second view. Early stories are more likely to end with a blasting, annihilating light, and then the story's over. And the later stories are more likely to imply that this is going to take a while. You know, conversion doesn't happen right away. And when I'm thinking about this, one of the possibilities that crosses my mind is maybe Flannery O'Connor, cradle Catholic that she was, never quite felt that she underwent anything, experienced anything that you could call a conversion. I mean, I think she might have thought she didn't need one. She was already in the right place. She already knew what she believed. She was, you know, ready for the next thing. It wasn't a matter of changing her views. It wasn't a matter of process. One of the things she says is that she, you know, in the letters of these 2 years, is that she feels like she's in a rut. She needs to try something different, right? Okay. Maybe that's one of the ways in which she tried something different, to try to write about conversion as a process. The religious life is something that doesn't just hit you upside the head, bolt from the blue, but something that you struggle with over time. An example of this, well, I mean, this is later, and it's not in 1961, 1962, but she's going to write the story of Revelation, which has at least 2 moments of revelation. You know, early in Flannery O'Connor's career, that scene in the waiting room at the doctor's office where Mary Grace hits Mrs. Turpin upside the head with a book and tells her she's a warthog from hell, that could have been the ending of a story if Flannery were trying to write Revelation at the beginning of her life. I could easily imagine it cutting off right at that point. But the mature end of her career, O'Connor has the story go on. And we get another really impressive recognition, revelation, conversion scene at the end of the story, where Mrs. Turpin sees everybody going to heaven, and then she's at the end of the line and this is as shocking a revelation to her as the first one. In a way, it makes the story maybe a more sophisticated, complicated version of orthodox version of how conversion works, or how the spiritual life works. But it relates to how she wrote too. The writing struggles she was having are tied to this kind of theological point. Why is she telling Betty Hester all this stuff? Betty Hester is just converted to Catholicism. You notice in these pages a few pages after they're having this discussion, where Flannery's explaining to Betty Hester, who just converted, what conversion is, Betty Hester leaves the church. Something's not going according to plan. I've read elsewhere that, I forget where, that one way to look at Betty Hester's situation is that she had Flannery O'Connor as the religious writer friend, and she also had Iris Murdoch as the not so religious writer friend. And that Flannery and Iris, who never met, were having a bit of a battle for Betty Hester. And apparently Iris Murdoch won because Betty left the church. And if you think about that, and then you go back and read these letters, there starts to be a little bit of a tinge of Flannery talking down to Betty Hester, being critical of Betty Hester. Let me tell you what your problem is to Betty Hester. And that rarely works. Having somebody explain your flaws to you, your mistakes to you, well, it might work 1% of the time, but it often backfires and makes people say, I don't need this. And I'm afraid that may be what's happening, on some level, as we're following these letters. Flannery says somewhere, and I've forgotten where this quote is, when people start talking at you about God, it can just make you feel lonelier. It might not bring you together. It's a remarkable thing for Flannery O'Connor to say, but you might see it illustrated in this correspondence between Flannery O'Connor and Betty Hester at this point, that Flannery is starting to sense that Betty's moving away from her, and some of this talk about conversion is really explaining to Betty how Betty's falling short, and this isn't going to turn out all that well. Betty Hester eventually committed suicide. I don't know how much you can see that in the letters that are going on now. When somebody commits suicide, everybody goes back through every scrap of information about their life and tries to see a prediction of suicide. And I don't know that that's really justifiable in this instance, but it's something to think about. Okay, and this is one of the places in the letters where Flannery talking about theology seems to me to be really closely connected to her writing struggles, the ways in which she's trying to do things in her writing that she hadn't done before, where she's trying to, do something new, get in something else. And her thoughts about theology with this personal friend could be leading her there. We don't always see that in everything. Okay, maybe that's too much about that. Okay, where to go after that? There are other comments in these letters about the art, and we might as well go to the famous one, which is on page 436, the English teacher. Well, this is shortly after the pages I've just been referring to. How much critical commentary has there been on this that Sally Fitzgerald reports in italics in the habit of being? The English teacher who writes to Flannery O'Connor and says, Miss O'Connor, we'd like for you to tell us whether we're right. We've decided that in A Good Man Is Hard to Find, the misfit doesn't really exist, that he's just a fantasy that's been created by Bailey. And we cannot, after great effort, determine the point at which reality fades into illusion or reverie. Does the accident in the car actually occur, or is it part of Bailey's dream? And Flannery eventually apologized for what she did next. She said, one of her great put downs of English teachers, I don't know what's wrong with you teachers. You fill your poor students' heads with these ridiculous interpretations, and it's the farthest thing in the world from my intention, and I'm in shock. Okay, how are we supposed to respond to this? I mean, it's I suppose popular to say that Flannery has to be right because this is her story, and it is a rather unusual interpretation. I mean, take on A Good Man Is Hard to Find that the misfit doesn't exist. He's just a dream. It seems to me that's a bit of a stretcher. But, okay, there's something there that's, I think, plausible, if not well stated. You take the first half of A Good Man Is Hard to Find, and you take the second half of A Good Man Is Hard to Find, and they are different universes. The rules of the game change. And on a literal level, it's because there's a car wreck. And the mass murderer comes along and kills everybody, and so, of course, the tone of the way the story is told is going to change. But there's something more to that. And yes, the misfit, he might be real. Yeah, she found him in the newspaper from Atlanta and, wrote him up as a character. But he's also symbolic. There was an article that was published, oh gosh, I don't have the citation, a few years ago, in Teresa Caruso's anthology of feminist readings of O'Connor, in which the argument was made that it's not Bailey who's dreaming up the misfit, it's the grandmother who's dreaming up the misfit, that he's a symbolic expression of a character's anger. It's not just Bailey who's mad as hell at everybody. You can also look at the grandmother and say, I am being disrespected and put upon and criticized and ridiculed by everybody in this family, all the way their story, and it's building up and building up and building up emotionally until I'm just about to explode. And that's exactly when the misfit appears. There's something going on. When Flannery gets these kind of edgy, weird interpretations out of people, she typically says, it's just literal. The hat's just a hat, statements like that. And yet, Flannery O'Connor is the one who goes on and on repeatedly about levels of interpretation. And, there's the moral and there's the anagogical, and she asked for it. She asked for people to look at her stories and say, okay, there's stuff here beyond the literal. What is it? And sure, people might come up with kind of odd, off-kilter results, but she asks us to think about it. She asks us to think about, now, what more could this mean beyond the literal? And, Flannery O'Connor is largely famous because of this story. It's everybody's introduction to Flannery O'Connor. It's in every anthology for, college freshmen, seems to me. And a lot of people get hooked on Flannery O'Connor because of this story. And it's not just literal. And Flannery knows that. Okay. So there's a reason for her to apologize, even though she is more right than the English teacher and the class. That's a pretty edgy take on the story, but it's always more complicated than that. When Flannery starts addressing what other people have made of her stories, she can be pretty stubborn and close-minded. sometimes. It's just the literal. Well, if it's just the literal, how is this about religion? If it's just the literal, how is this anagogical about the divine life and our participation in it? How are you going to get from the literal to there if you say if you're going to turn on people and say it's just the literal? A Good Man is Hard to Find is one of the most overexplicated stories in all of American literature. Good for Flannery. It's good for her reputation. Well, it's partly because whether she wants to admit it or not, she did pack this suitcase. And if people, find the stuff in the suitcase that she packed, well, it's kind of there. I mean, not always, but a lot of the time. Okay, that's my take on this famous thing is that, yeah, it's really funny when Flannery puts somebody down for overinterpreting. And she does that a lot, when she tells off Bill Sessions and says not everything is a Freudian sexual symbol. Yeah, I'm on her side, is it Bill Sessions overdid it? But she did ask us to be on the lookout for how things are more than they appear. And often it's crucial to the power of a story that we be willing to look beyond the surface. Hats are more than hats. In Flannery O'Connor, he opined. Okay. She also says numerous times in these pages, don't think so much. I don't think when I'm writing a story. You shouldn't think when you're writing a story. You should just read the story and enjoy it and don't think. Emotions, the heart, that's more important than the head. Some people, read the comments that are common in these pages, and they say, well, Flannery O'Connor is just one of the great anti-intellectuals who ever wrote short stories. Well, yeah, but this is Flannery's way of saying, look for another way to look at things, look at another way to understand. And this is a person who lives pretty much in her head, realizing that she too needs to be more in touch with her emotions and her heart and figure out how to get that into her fiction. So I take those comments with a bit of a grain of salt. I mean, I enjoy it when she says, don't think so much, that we're overthinking. I mean, it's fun. And at the same time, I think, well, you do also want us to think about these stories. You want us to be haunted by them forever. And it's partly on an intellectual level, and it's partly on an emotional level. And it works, if you read any story as a totally intellectual mind game, it works. If you take any story and you want to read it as having nothing to do with ideas and it's just about raw emotion that characters don't realize they're feeling, well, it works that way too. And she can get away with having it all ways. So I'm bringing that up because this passage gets quoted over and over and over and over and over in criticism. And the standard take is that the English teacher is wrong and Flannery is right with her put downs. And to some extent that's true. I mean, but it's always more complicated than that. Flannery says she wasn't thinking at all when she wrote A Good Man is Hard to Find. I don't believe her. I think she's just saying that for effect. In that instance, there's too much going on in that story for her not to have thought some of it through. She just doesn't want to admit it. A couple of other moments where she makes comments about her own fiction that I'm going to pick out because I know there are people who don't believe she's right. And what she's saying about her own writing, what do we do with that? If we trust Flannery, and we do, most people really, I trust Flannery 99% of the time. Do we believe everything that she says? I know quite a few people who read The Comforts of Home And they think it's a story about a silly, silly, silly mama character who's way too generous to Sarah Ham, Star Drake, who shows up and turns the world upside down. Flannery says the mother is the one whose position is correct. I read lots of critical articles and chapters in books about that story in which they say just the opposite. And they think Flannery's on their side. Well, what are you going to do when she says just the opposite of what you've been arguing in your very thoughtful critical article? And then the other one I'll pick out is what she says about the violent buried away. Page 48, 486. The violence that we're referring to here in this novel is violence that is directed inward. Oh, really? People shoot at each other in this novel. And Flannery also says some things about she's on the side of the people who are shooting the guns. When she says the violence is directed inward, that you do violence on yourself in order to achieve the kingdom of heaven, well, that's a whole nother take on it. The last time that book was reprinted, I think the last time they came up with covers, they put guns all over the front of the book as if we're going to have a shootout here and it's going to be fun. Like it's going to be the Wild West. Yeehaw, let's fire off some guns. Well, do you believe it when Flannery says no? Gary Chiuba wrote a chapter in which in his book, in which he argues very thoroughly that Flannery is not endorsing violence and the violent buried away. You can take this quote and you can say, okay, Flannery is not endorsing that kind of violence, gun shooting violence in the violent buried away. Most people who read this book think it's an endorsement of violence. I know people who say they don't like the violent buried away because it's such an endorsement of shooting people who disagree with you. Okay. I like the idea that we can be more interested, not less interested in O'Connor when we watch her becoming just one more of us readers trying to figure out what to make of the text that she created in the past. There's a kind of a classroom critical principle that lots of people teach these days about after the author finishes the work, they just become one more critic and their opinions don't matter any more than anybody else's. We usually don't say that about Flannery. We usually treat Flannery as the person who understands all this stuff and it's totally consistent. She's got it all worked out and we trust her. Sometimes that gets held against her that she's got it all figured out too much. Well, I can play that game so that Flannery is not the final authority on everything she wrote. She's just one more person with an opinion, and it might be good for her reputation if we feel that way. Okay, so how Flannery thinks about her fiction, that she often wrote with her heart and her gut, there might be some gaps in there. There might be some little contradictions. Okay, thank you. Oh, yes, thank you, Heidi. I'm appreciating your comments that I was not sure of the answer to that question that Brenda was asking about. What was the age difference between Flannery and Betty Hester? And you point out it's 2 years. Okay, and Betty was older than Flannery. Thank you. I was going to have to dodge that. I was going to have to dodge that question. Okay. Where do we go with this? One of the stories that she wrote in this period was The Lame Shall Enter First. Okay, this is one of the stories that gives me the most trouble. It makes me hurt inside every time I revisit it. I said it's a wonderful story, but it just makes me hurt. It makes me ill. Why? Well, how do I justify this feeling? Okay. When Alfred Korn, an undergraduate at Emory, wrote a letter to Flannery O'Connor saying that he's struggling with his faith. Could Flannery please help him out? And he talks about the ideas that he's troubled by and how does he reconcile this with his faith. Flannery gives the possibly very wise advice: stop thinking so much and do the right thing. And her way of saying it is give alms. Find somebody who needs something and give them what they need. And don't think about it too much. Okay. How do we apply that to the Lynch line first? I have real trouble here. I mean, I don't like Shepard, the main character in the Lynch line first, but it seems to me you can make the case he took Flannery's advice. He didn't think too much about the significance of what he was doing. He just saw this kid who's eating out of garbage cans, and he said, what this kid needs is a home. I'll take him home, take care of him. He didn't think it all through and say, oh my goodness, this is going to make me not spend as much time with my own child. This could potentially backfire. Maybe I should just leave the guy sitting in the alley eating out of the garbage can because it might be bad for my relationship with his son. No, he just does the right thing. And there is nothing about that that works out well. To me, this is the biggest gotcha story Flannery ever wrote. Take a character and just beat him to a pulp in the course of that story. And he's got an epiphany at the end, but I think it's a totally phony epiphany, and that he's just damned as he can be at the end of that story in a way that I find really creepy. Masterfully done. Okay. Now, also in these years, you're getting some back and forth between Flannery O'Connor and the novelist John Hawkes. John Hawkes is the guy who famously wrote the essay. It's been anthologized in a number of places. Heidi, I think, is trying to hold it up to show to us. Yeah, I see it. There it is. The Sewanee Review. There's the issue. He wrote an essay called Flannery O'Connor's Devil, in which he said, well, Flannery thinks she's on God's side. This is a paraphrase, of course. She thinks she's on God's side, but no, she's not. She's on the devil's side. Why? Because she has so much fun ripping her little characters to shreds. She loves playing gotcha and attacking and attacking and attacking and attacking and attacking until there's nothing left of these poor slobs. Flannery O'Connor read his essay before it was published. She said, I don't agree with you, but I like how you're paying attention, and I hope it gets published. And she went back and forth with him about your notion of the devil and my notion of the devil are different. And then she wrote The Lame Shall Enter First, and she wrote a letter to John Hawkes in which she said, and it's in these pages, in this one, I'll agree that the devil's voice is my own. What? Okay, read The Lame Shall Enter First and explain to me. I mean, I guess I can explain it to myself. Think about, how is this story so different from the others? If this is the devil's voice, why are other O'Connor stories not from the devil's voice? If you read Flannery O'Connor and all she does is criticize and criticize and satirize and attack and attack and attack her characters and show how flawed they are, well, isn't that what her notion of the devil, that's what the devil's up to? Destroy, destroy, destroy. Now, I can explain this to myself about how The Lame Shall Enter First is a unique story, and it is more devilish than others. But I'm not sure there's not a little fun playing devil in a lot of other Flannery O'Connor. Can I find this passage? Oh, yeah. Page 470. I'm not having to turn many pages to get to all of these parts that I'm going to talk about. Page 470. She's talking to him and explaining to him how wrong he is. Okay. Bottom paragraph on page 470. This is Flannery talking to John Hawkes. I think what you do is reduce the good and give what you take from it to the diabolical. Isn't it arbitrary to call these images, such as the cat-faced baby and the old woman that looked like a cedar fence post and the grandfather who went around with Jesus hidden in his head like a stinger, perverse? They are right, accurate. So why perverse? Well, I'll tell you why. I mean, I think John Hawkes is right to some extent. Okay. I'll give Flannery the grandfather who went around with Jesus hidden in his head like a stinger. Okay. That's religious. I can work that all out, and that's a godly narration voice talking. But don't tell me, Flannery, that when you compare a baby's face to a cat, that there's something wholesome going on here. I don't buy it. When you tell me that an old woman looks like a cedar fence post, I do not see your open-mindedness to the beauty of that woman's soul. All I see is attack mode. So I'm gonna argue with Flannery here again. I'm gonna say, okay, you picked your quotes when you're trying to show John Hawkes that you're not devilish. Gee, you didn't come up with very good examples. Taking a baby and saying it's like a cat. I mean, unless you really love cats, I can read that as devilish sort of thing to say. When you tell me that a woman, oh my God, she's old, that she looks like a cedar fence post, accuracy? No, this goes way beyond accuracy. I don't believe I've ever met anybody who literally looks like a cedar fence post. There's some imagination going on here. And no, there's nothing godly and wholesome. We're being invited to be devilishly, perversely enjoying satire, criticism, playing gotcha. Okay, so that's my take on all this stuff. This is a section of the letters gets talks about a lot. Is Flannery devilish? And it seems like such an absurd thing to say that of course we have to agree with Flannery when she tells John Hawkes he doesn't understand her, complicated artistic method and her theology well enough to get it. And I agree with some of what she tells him about what he thinks the devil is, and it's just a literary device, and she believes in the real devil, and never the twain shall meet, all that stuff. When she puts him in his place theologically, of course I'm going to agree with Flannery. But when she's talking about the details of her art and saying there's nothing perverse about that, I'm going to say, yes, there is. And John Hawkes pointed it out to you. And that's why you had to admit that there was some truth to what he was saying. Flannery O'Connor is partly the great religious writer that she is because she also can play devil. And it makes the fiction ever so much more complicated. She tricks us as we're reading into being devilish. And then at some point, she also points out to us, look what I got you to do. Aren't you ashamed of yourself for enjoying this story and enjoying these lines that I've just gotten you to enjoy, even though when you think about it, it's pretty weird stuff. If you go through the pages here and you just read the correspondence between John Hawkes and Flannery O'Connor, there's a certain clear theological difference going on when they're talking about art and how to write and how an image works. I think his attitude is more respectable. And he did write a lot of novels, and he did teach at Brown. I mean, he was no dummy, this fellow. And so let's not dismiss his point of view. And let's admit, if Flannery's playing devil, we can't exactly expect her to admit it every 5 minutes. It's going to be something that she's doing and that she's good at that she doesn't quite understand. Oh, by the way, she's Rufus. She does things because she's good at it. And we might still think that Rufus is just the most objectionable little devil she ever created. I mean, he's quoting the Bible and asking all the right questions and saying all the right things, and he gets the other kid to commit suicide. What a jerk. I don't want to believe that story's asking me to approve of Rufus's behavior in that story. I always tell people in my O'Connor class, if you can get past A View of the Woods and The Lame Shall Enter First, and you haven't given up on Flannery, yeah, you're home free. You're gonna find a lot that's easier to like than that stuff. What else do we have? Oh yeah. Here's a comment from Heidi. Thank you, Heidi. Do you know if this article and the one written by Robert Fitzgerald, also in that Cervani Review issue, and the one she references on page 474 in the English Journal are the first literary criticisms? I mean, beyond the regular reviews that come out at publication. What year is this? What year is this essay, Heidi? I never thought of that as 1962. Well, yeah, that is pretty early. Well, the answer to that is in the big bibliography that came out before the Scott bibliography. And I don't know when you can say, the first piece of literary criticism was written. 62 is pretty early. 62 is early enough so that Flannery O'Connor might be saying, hey, even if you get me all wrong, publish something about me, because that's good for my it's good for my career. Yeah, there were a lot of dissertations, and some of those would turn into books later. But I haven't thought a whole lot about, the Anthology of Criticism by Douglas Robillard is chronological, and he probably has an opinion about what were the first things that were published. But it's early enough. 1962 is early enough, so you could say, well, thank you for saying anything about me. She complains so much about the book reviews that were written. Okay, Xavier University Studies, thank you very much. Published something in 1963 about her Catholicism. I would say Flannery got appreciated pretty early. There are plenty of people who don't have any serious criticism written about them until they've been writing for lots and lots of years.
Can I add the title?
Certainly.
Right here, Heidi's inspiring me to hold books up.
Hold up books.
There we go. There we go.
Xavier University Studies.
Xavier University Studies. It's from March 1963. And it was by a guy by the name of Ranulph A. Stelzman, who was teaching at Xavier at the time. And it's called Shock and Orthodoxy, an Interpretation of Flannery O'Connor's Novels and Short Stories. And it was everything she'd written up to that point. Oh. He sent it to her. She wrote back and said, oh, you really get me. I'm going to have to tell people about this article. Thank you so much. And that sounds nice. But when I was doing research on O'Connor, and I basically found a note that she put in one of her address books, and she's got Xavier U Studies, this guy's name, what page it's on and everything. And when I saw that, it's like, she really meant this. She really meant, oh, I will tell people about it. So she was interested in what people had to say. I guess if they were, I mean, as much as she talked to the English teacher and said, you're nuts for doing that, she did appreciate whatever it was he was saying, because he was looking at her, that, you know, Xavier's a Catholic university, and he was looking at her as a Catholic writer. And so maybe that's why she liked it.
Mhm. Yeah, that could be. And, you know, criticism helps, book reviews
Yeah.
might not. You know, she got a lot of irritating, not very thoughtful reviews of her books. But when people talk about everything she's written, you know, up to that moment, that's a whole other order of commentary. I went I went to the AWP convention this year, and I went to a session about book reviewing, and it seemed to me that the audience was filled with writers who said, how do I even get anybody to write a book review about me? It's impossible. Well, Flannery got book reviews. Criticism, that didn't even come up. Nobody was asking for literary criticism. They figure that, I guess they just think that's impossible to get anybody to take them that serious. They just were asking for the first stinking review of the book they published. There were people there talking about how they won prizes, but nobody ever pays any attention to them, even after they've won a prize for their book. That's a whole nother subject, but it might have something to do with how Flannery responds to what people have written about her. Thank you
We're
for
out of time.
the chat tonight, folks. Yeah, we are out of time. We'll see you next month. Maybe I'll see you on the Zoom on Flannery's birthday Monday night as we listen to the fascinating relatives of Flannery O'Connor talking about Uncle Lewis, and maybe they'll mention Flannery once in a while as they go. People should put in the chat that they should say something about Flannery once in a while on her birthday, okay? Don't make me do it. You do it. That's funny. Thank you.